Coming up, Ben Saraf and Noah Clowney prepare for expanded roles in a Nets rotation that might look different than some fans expected out of the gate. I'll dive into all those preseason takeaways and more after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's show, I'm going to be offering some takeaways from the Nets' first preseason game and training camp as a whole. I'll touch on several players who could surprise fans out of the gate and how Jordi Fernandez could craft the team's rotation early in the season. And joining the pod again, we got Lucas Kaplan from Nets Daily back for the second straight day. And Lucas, today we're going to be giving some takeaways from the Nets' first preseason game and also training camp as a whole. But you got an opportunity to watch the film on what the Nets put on tape against Hapoel Jerusalem and that riveting contest at Barclays Center on Saturday. So, we'll touch on a few things, but your top takeaway from that film and what you saw on the court, obviously a mismatch, but what do you got for me? What was the top thing you saw?
Oh, man. You think Anthony Lamb is close to maybe a two-way look from Long Island?
Possible.
No. Yeah. Listen, the NBA is a very good league, I think, is the main takeaway. But I'm like excited. I'm getting excited again. Like I'm looking forward to see all these guys play. It really put into perspective to me, like this is that time of the year. I just realized their two games against the Suns are 8 a.m. and 7 a.m. local time, which is putting a little bit of a dim on it, but I'll get through it.
Lucas isn't a morning person, for those of you who don't know, so that's going to be a change of pace for him.
I'm a late night, early morning person, not an 8 a.m. sort of guy. Yeah, Saraf looked. Listen, I think Saraf, looked like I think if you asked people in the know, like including both of us, like before that game, I was asked on some pod, like gun to head, what do you think the starting five is going to be opening night? And I was like, I think Ben, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you saw why. Like he is legitimately a big, very confident ball handling guard. And I said this to you, he'll miss jumpers, but he won't look overwhelmed. And like Nolan, conversely, and Yegor has the foot thing. Nolan,
yeah, let me just butt in for a second. This is all
please.
Ben starting is all with the assumption, which it's not an assumption, but it seems like it's trending in a direction where there's a decent chance that Yegor Dioman is not going to be ready for the regular season opener because he has not done contact work yet, 2 weeks out from the Nets' first game. And I talked about this on the pod right after the preseason game, and some people were like, Ben starting over Yegor, that's a disaster. It's like, no. Like, if Yegor's healthy, he's probably going to be starting. This is with the assumption that Yegor's out, Ben and Nolan being in the competition. But
also why, like, let's say he's ready for that game, right? Let's say he's ready for October 22nd. Off what? Like 2 healthy practices, like maybe 1 preseason game. I think it's fine. And I don't think it's a disaster if, Ben has been healthy all training camp, probably in a little bit more of a groove, can get the ball where it needs to go, just giving your offense a little bit more of a stable structure, as much as a rookie point guard can actually provide that. So yeah, that's fine. And he, again, competent ball handler. And I don't say that as a backhanded compliment. Like, just, again, I keep using this phrase, professional handle. Like, the right amount of craft and downhill decision-making, knows where his outlet, his release points are, where the shooters are going to be, how to read the weak side. And I think Nets fans who, didn't like dive into his EuroLeague tape or really keep up with every piece of reporting from training camp kind of see what we see now, which is, yeah, this guy's probably ready for an NBA look, not that it reflects a ton on his long-term upside, but not super surprising after what we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, when you would juxtapose that to what you saw from Nolan Traore and just what you know about him, what do you think about what you saw on film from him? Because obviously, like, I think they both looked good. I thought Ben looked better. Again, not going to take like too many huge takeaways from a game against this competition level. But my takeaway after that game was I think the pace that Ben is playing with, the size, I think all of that kind of lends itself to him having a little bit more time and space to make decisions and just looking like he's playing the game a little bit more under control and, through a slower lens, as opposed to Nolan, who's kind of just getting downhill and going. And that maybe doesn't always leave as much room for error in terms of the decision-making process. And that might play into what you say about the coaches having trust in Ben to get the ball where it needs to be in the right spots.
Yeah, I think you can see why the coaches at this point in time would just feel more comfortable with Ben out on the floor than Nolan, if it were an NBA game tomorrow. Nolan is trying to turn the corner, which I love, but if his plan A gets cut off, what's the plan B? Ben, at least we know, okay, like a retreat dribble, spin, kind of slow down, at the very least, seems like he'll be able to avoid turnovers and if you think about it like a quarterback, the big negative plays, like he'll be able to throw the ball away under pressure, right? Like retreat, whatever, it's fine. And Nolan isn't quite there yet. But again, I don't think that's a bad thing if you this is kind of what he looked like last year in Summer League. This is kind of who Nolan is. And you can see the tools and some of the defensive acumen, right, from time to time with just being quick and the long wingspan. But just going to take a little bit to be ready for consistent on-ball reps at the NBA level, whereas Ben can probably do a passable job sooner.
And it needs to be made clear that this isn't to say anything about their long-term ceilings. Like there's a reason that the Nets picked Nolan, what was it, 7 spots ahead of where they picked Ben. They clearly see a ceiling and a trajectory with Nolan. Not that they don't see that with Ben, but it would lead you to believe that they were higher on Nolan in the pre-draft process. This is just out of the gate. For a point guard, there's some things that Nolan's going to need to improve. Obviously, the size being the biggest one, adding weight to his frame, and also playing with a little bit more pace, a little bit more of an in-between game, and developing that craft that Ben has out of the gate. But some of the physical tools in terms of speed and things like that Nolan has might lend itself to a higher ceiling. When you look at Ben in this expanded role this season, because I think it's safe to say, at least out of the gate, he's going to play a lot of minutes, probably going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And that might be something that obviously fans weren't expecting when this draft class, came together. What do you think are fair expectations for Ben in this role early?
Yeah, I think a lot of the draft stuff too is maybe less so about position and more so the Nets, especially because we can see that they had a very consistent philosophy and through line on who they believe to be best player available and what they valued. Probably just more about where are these guys going to be available? Is Nolan going to be available at 26? Probably not, but Ben is. Okay. But I think a fair expectation is at this point, and it's tough to read a lot into it, probably not a ton of G League time for him compared to the other rookies. If you trust him to be, and probably not a great opening night point guard in the NBA, day one of his rookie year, but at least if you're going to throw him out there, you have to believe in his current floor a little bit. And so the expectation a good year would be, well, you're getting real NBA minutes and you're showing flashes that you can create downhill and do some of the stuff you did against good European competition, stack, moves, crossover between the legs, spin move to get into the lane. Again, dropping people off with the upper body. And if you can just do that enough against NBA comp, if you're starting on night one, I don't want to see it in the G League. I want to see it now. I think that's a fair expectation. And hopefully he's not, the worst shooter in the league. I don't think he will be, but hopefully he's making some 3-pointers when guys go under and stuff like that. I think it's fair to expect him to have some positive games in the NBA in his rookie season, which is not easy for a guard.
No, it's not. I think it's fair. Ben has a pretty well-developed skill set for his age.
Yeah.
I think that's a reason that he's taken a lot of these Nets players by surprise in training camp and the offseason runs who didn't really know that much about him. And it's a reason why after reviewing some of his tape and looking at stuff, after the pick, I was pretty on board with where the Nets got him, with that being a good pick and a good dart throw, a good value add at that spot in the draft. What would you, last thing, what do you say? Like, he was the 26th pick in the draft. Like, it's not that common, I feel like, that you get ball handlers, and he still hasn't played a game against NBA competition yet, so we don't know. But the Nets are also trying to tank, so there's not too high expectations for the point guard. But you get a guy at that spot who's going to start at point guard for an NBA team. Like, that obviously says something about the Nets tanking agenda, but also they're putting him out there and they trust him to run an offense competently. And that's not something that you often see from point guards drafted, rookie point guards in that draft spot, I feel like.
Yeah, it's this thing that I talked about last year where we kind of should conflate floor and ceiling a little bit more, because if you can get on the court, that's how you get better. Like, if you can just get yourself playing time, it leads to getting better. And so Ben, at the very least, maybe we underrated it. Maybe I underrated it around draft time. But, like, if he can get on the court, this guy can get better. And that's a swing to take at 26. Like, I guess we'll see how the talent around him in that draft slot develops. But I'm not afraid to say, like, it's been a good, I guess, start to his very, very brief NBA career, and, like, can at least see the vision with the Nets drafting him. That being said, obviously a million miles to go, and hopefully a jump shot that is in progress. And Nets fans should be, not through the roof, but, like, a little excited about it, and at least happy that this guy seems off to a decent little start. He's got a little bit of dog to him. You can tell he gets a little chippy. Like,
how do you think he'll resonate with the fan base out of the gate? Because he's going to be a guy who has probably the most significant role of the rookies until Yegor is back at full strength. Like, what do you think the fan reaction is going to be to some of the things that he does? I have some hope that there could be some good moments, because we have talked about the flash that he has to his game. Like, I think that could at least, we'll get some highlight clips. Like, fans might get excited about that stuff. What's your expectation?
I don't know. I hope it's not like a bridesmaid thing where people just want to see Yegor and Nolan and are, like, annoyed, right? But, like, you should be excited about anything. They don't draft a lot of 19-year-olds that contribute since coming to Brooklyn. Like, if he's contributing, I expect the fans to be, not like scheduling their days off for the parade in the spring, but at least allowing themselves to smile. I get a bunch of comments on Nets Daily like, enough with all the self-flagellation and, like, woe is me. I'm like, well, that is kind of a prerequisite for being a Nets fan, but I will allow for some optimism on this one.
All right, we got some other Nets takeaways from this preseason action and also from training camp as a whole. Noah Clowney, we got some rotation predictions. We got some other stuff we got to get to, so we'll hit on all that when we continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Quo. Guys, one of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying two phones or relying on a landline. I love how Quo, formerly Open Phone, lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like a shared inbox, so no customer gets left hanging. Their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hour calls, capture leads, and keep business moving even when you're off the clock. Guys, see why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Nets Daily's Lucas Kaplan. Given some of our takeaways from Brooklyn's first preseason game, Lucas just got to watch the tape a little bit delayed. We talked about Ben Saraf at the top, but I think Noah Clowney, someone who stood out, not necessarily from the production or anything along those lines, but I think from how he looked on the court and it matching kind of the hype and also the eye test of what we've gotten to see at Nets practice and Nets training camp. So What do you think about Clowney, and what stood out to you about him during his first game action of his third NBA season?
He just looks big, and like you really notice it after you're used to just observing him through a screen for 2 years. And then he's back on the screen. And you're like, oh, he looks different and just stronger. And also like that'll probably help the release point on his jumper. Just I'm excited for him, and it did nothing to quell that excitement. I hope he gets to play a lot and soon, and can do some very defensive things. Like he can be a guy that you play as a wing in terms of like switching. He switched a lot of actions, and he can also, if you want to really turn up the aggressiveness, like you can trap like a wing to wing ball screen with him, or a guard to wing ball screen, something like that. Like you just want him to be making mistakes out of aggression and trying stuff. And I think he has the body this year to do that. Instead of just, what Nets fans don't want to see, and what I totally get, is it's like he plays 25 minutes and it's like, where is Noah Clowney other than taking like 5 catch and shoot threes standing in the corner? Like, can you just do things? This will be a year of doing things, I hope.
And that added weight, obviously, that added mass is going to be a big part of that. It sounds like you're more bullish about those standout moments coming on the defensive end of the floor, and this added size really, you're more optimistic that he's going to have a bigger impact on that end, as opposed to him rounding out the less polished aspects of his offensive game, which is putting the ball on the floor, being an off-script decision maker and creator, and things along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, and even when they drafted him, that was clearly very far away, but also like he was really good on defense in the G League, or got a lot better in his rookie year, and then he comes up and he's blocking like 5 shots and kind of flying around and doing varied things, and then we just didn't really see that last year. And the offense, I think we can all accept, will kind of come and go, and he'll make shots and miss shots and figuring out his role. But defensively, it's like, where did that go? The activity. So I'm more
where do you think it went? Because it's such a hard thing for me, at least, to distinguish like why that kind of disappeared from the end of his rookie year tape to then. And obviously, like, you always need to take NBA action in March and April with a grain of salt, because that's, there's a lot of watered down stuff going on. But he looked so standout in those games. I mean, he had the 6 block game. He was doing all those things. And then in the sophomore season, even before the ankle injuries, like that's the thing you would point to is, he was hobbled the whole year. But we had like 20 or so games before that, and it didn't feel like that was standing out at all. So do you think it was scheme? Do you think it was just him not being active enough? Like, what do you attribute it to?
I think a little bit of scheme. Like, I think the Nets under Kevin Ollie, right? Am I getting the years right? And the holdover from JV were a little bit more like base, drop coverage, like keep the low man where they are, a little bit less, like maintain the shell, less flying around. And I think that helped Noah, because it's like, all right, you're here, you're coming over and help. Like, you're not really having to fly around and X out and all this stuff. And so I think if you're looking for a schematic reason, under Jordi, they have been more like, let's fly around. We're breaking the shell. We're like trapping and hedging and recovering for each other. And I think that was a difficult transition for him. And then I think also there's just like, he sprained his ankle 4 times, and it was just really hard for him to get a rhythm. And I'm willing to kind of just accept that as the primary reason.
I think the point you made about Jordi Fernandez's defense is a really good one, because that's something that I've asked players about and I've heard at training camp. Cam Thomas, actually a player, and I asked him where he thinks he can improve defensively this year. And he did say just like understanding of the defensive principles and being more engaged. And he said because the way the Nets are playing defense under Jordi Fernandez is a lot more on a string, and it's a lot more involved, and there's a lot more, movement and understanding of defensive principles that have to go in that. So that would, kind of fit along the lines of what you're saying about Noah, whereas his rookie season, it being a little bit of a watered down, like stand here, rotate over, get these blocks, as opposed to doing all these other things. But I'm excited to see, with Noah. He looks the part. I think it stood out. Like, he had one play where Drew Timme kind of threw him like an alley-oop on a backdoor, and he got up and kind of elevated over the guy and threw it down. And I'm like, those are the athletic flashes that I'm hoping to see, obviously, on both ends of the floor. And I'm pretty excited that he'll be able to make those flashes. Anything else from you stand out in this game? Any other players who you think that kind of jumped off the screen in certain moments?
Last thing on Noah, I do think he also just had the run up of like, man, I'm getting so much better. I'm playing all the time in the G League. All right, I'm ready to go in the NBA. And then last year, it's like, I'm on the bench. I don't know where my minutes are coming from. Then I hurt. So I just think that all kind of melded into one big, not regression, but a little bit less, of those flashy moments on tape. The other thing from this preseason game, they're going to keep playing an aggressive style of defense. I was kind of looking at Nick Claxton. Like, I feel like I couldn't glean much. I mean, he is just this interesting, almost like elephant in the room this year of we've kind of all moved on from his arc, but it's been weird and up and down from him. And he's still only like 26, and I
feel so much older than that. It's like so weird with him.
7 years.
And Cam Thomas. It's like I asked Cam about this at training camp practice. It's like Cam calls himself an old head. He's 23. It's like the weirdest thing. Like some of these guys feel like they're like seasoned vets, and that might be more a testament to how young the NBA is than anything else. And also the roster turnover in Brooklyn, I think, plays a big part in it too.
Yeah, Nick Claxton was teammates with like Jared Allen, and I could dig up some other names. David Nwaba.
David Nwaba, Nets legend for like 2 weeks. R.I.P. Nwaba.
The only thing I remember about that 2019-2020 team, other than the Karis LeVert v. Damian Lillard game in the bubble. Yeah. I am, curious. I felt like I just couldn't glean much from Nick. Like, if the athleticism is back, and it's not even so much a Nets thing, more about like, what is his career going to look like no matter where he is? I just felt like I am going to need to see more. I couldn't really develop like an opinion after one preseason game against an overmatched opponent.
What do you think about the Nets defensive scheme? You said if they're going to play an aggressive scheme, it's going to be really involved with all those things. How do you feel about the Cam Thomas, Michael Porter Jr. combination in that defensive scheme?
I think I mentioned yesterday that one play they were responsible for like Xing out on the weak side, and they both kind of looked like two outfielders not calling a ball that drops between them.
They're like, you get it. No, you get it. It's like they're like staring at each other.
Far. They're like,
MPJ's defensive effort and engagement in this game out of the gate, I'd call it less than stellar to put it nicely.
What's the antonym for teach tape?
I don't know.
Burn after reading. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to take too much away. But yeah, it should be good. It'll benefit a guy like Danny, I think. I guess I'm going against the grain, against consensus. I see him more as like the biggest guy on the court, aka center versus the four. Like he really is. This has been my main takeaway since they drafted him. Legit 6'11", 7 feet maybe. Legit 250, like big. Obviously, gonna have to trim more of that weight into muscle and just get on the NBA training regimen. But big and long, and I think can hang more in the paint, being smart about like positional contesting and getting his hands in passing lanes. Like you get those centers from time to time, like Jokic or whoever, that like average 2 steals a game and are near the top of the leaderboard. I'm not saying that'll be him, but that's more of like a feasible outcome for him to defensive impact rather than like to be a 4 in this league. Like you gotta like X out and
it's a lot.
It's a lot of
running. It's a lot. And that honestly, like that was a worry for Noah. And like, you know, it's still a question mark with Noah. Obviously, we're talking about his defensive, fall off last year. And I think for Noah and Danny, they're both these kind of tweeners. And I think defensively, you might see some similarities. I think the difference is Noah has a lot more vertical explosiveness, as like a rim protector and things along those lines. Whereas Danny might have a little bit more like weight and mass to him, but doesn't have that vertical pop. So it's different. And then offensively, obviously, like they're just completely different players.
I also think Noah can like flip his hips a little bit more and like kind of live on switches and contain with his length. Whereas I don't want Danny Wolf in space. So that was another thing from the preseason game. Like I'm like, yeah, I could see Danny as a 5 in this system where like
That's interesting.
he's hedging and recovering, and it probably won't look great, but
You
he
probably
isn't
need
a
to you probably need to insulate him with like maybe a
he's
bigger rim protecting 4 or
yeah,
something like
like
that. Like,
Zaire and Noah on the
yeah.
backside. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that's interesting. And honestly, like I'm very intrigued by Danny, intrigued by some comments we got from Jordi Fernandez, some things, I talked to Danny twice last week. So me and you, maybe we might do a whole episode on Danny because I'm interested
yeah,
with what you just said. But I do also think there were some rotation takeaways from
yeah.
this game, particularly obviously with the point guard battle and also at the bottom of the roster. So what were those and how do we feel about them? We'll get to all that when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Every day we make decisions, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections, like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. Guys, I love how quick it is. You can make your lineup in just under a minute. My favorite part, Prize Picks just added stacks. So if I want to ride with a player, I can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with one click. Guys, download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily with some takeaways from Brooklyn's first preseason game and just things we're hearing overall at training camp. I do think that while you can't always take so much away from preseason rotations, I do think there were some telling developments with how Jordi Fernandez handled this with all these guys. There's 18 guys available for this preseason game or whatever it was. What'd you take away rotationally, was the biggest thing? And also just things you're hearing from training camp. Like, what's the most surprising or biggest rotation development that you're looking at right now?
I mean, I think other than Ben leaping to the top of the point
Yeah,
guard
besides
chain,
that.
like, dude, there's so many guys. There's so many guys that like
Yeah.
have a case for minutes,
Yeah.
Like, if we're being real and it's merit based, like Kobe should probably play more than the other young guards other than Cam Thomas. And like, I know Haywood Highsmith's not healthy right now, but I'm sure he feels like he deserves minutes, being a piece on a finals team, right? Like that.
And the Nets are going to want to,
minutes.
the Nets probably want to flip him. So they're going to want to play him right out of the gate.
My question is just like, listen, I just keep coming back to the front office and like in the organization. How aggressive are you going to be tanking this year? Because if you're not that aggressive, there's no way you can get all 14 of these guys playing time. Like someone is going to be benched and it's just going to be tough. I mean,
one of the
Drake is going to be in Long Island, right?
Yeah,
and
that's what I was about to say.
Nolan. Like
I think Nolan, Drake, and Danny are gonna be early. They're gonna have like residency at Nassau Coliseum out of the gate. And I don't think like some Nets fans might be annoyed by that or frustrated by that, but it's just a reality of the situation. Because if you look at this first, you have a guy like Haywood Highsmith, like in regard to like say Drake's position. The Nets are going to want to play him if he's healthy, just because they're going to want to trade him. And you could say that shouldn't be a priority, like whatever. He's only going to get you a second-round pick. I'm sure the Nets want that second-round pick, and Sean Marks wants to say that he got him, alongside a second-round pick and flipped him for another second-round pick. And like, does that have no significance? Like, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. But there's a lot of guys, like you're saying. Like, look at the wing rotation. You have Terrence, you have Haywood, you have Zaire, you have obviously MPJ, bigger wing, but there's just all of those guys. So outside of the point guard, and then if you're talking about Danny Wolf, I mean, you have at both positions, you have Nick and Dayron ahead of him at center, and then you have MPJ and Noah ahead of him at forward. And, those guys are going to have to spend some time on Long Island out of the gate.
And you don't want to clip Jordy's wings entirely. Like he keeps Nets fans roll their eyes, and I get it, but like they played hard last year. They were, by all accounts, a well-coached team, right? And like fun to be around. There was something of like a culture happening. You wanted to be in the building, right? And so if a bedrock of that is yeah, we're going to play the guys that do the right thing and execute my principles, right? And you come in and like Haywood Highsmith knows where to be on defense all the time, and Terrence Mann is like making the right rotations and doing what is asked of him, even if he's only shooting 29% from three. It's a weird look to play Drake Powell over these guys, especially Drake. You can't. It doesn't work like that.
It's not how that. Yeah, it's not how the NBA works. You get a bad rep around the league if you trade for these vets, and then especially some of which are in contract years like Haywood, and then you bury them on the bench and you do some of these things and you start messing with their money and things along those lines. Like, unless there's warrant to it,
right?
Which in this case, I guess you could say there's warrant to playing the rookies ahead of them just because of where the Nets are at, but it's a slippery slope, I would say, with that stuff.
Especially if they're doing what's asked of them, and like I would put my life on the line that they're a little bit more impressive in training camp than these rookies that have never played. That being said, them, as you said, being down in Long Island is good. I think the big rotational takeaways is that it's going to be what we said. Veteran heavy, and then it's going to look a little bit like last season where they lean into the young guys a little bit more down the stretch. The first Nick Claxton or Day'Ron Sharp 2-week injury, you'll probably see more Danny, right?
Yeah.
Or Zaire or Noah if you want to try to play him a little bit more at the 4.
And I'd expect trades, in addition to the injuries, like there's going to be trades. Haywood, I would definitely point to if Cam Thomas comes out of the gate hot, I think that a Cam Thomas trade could come early in the year, similar to what we saw with Dennis Schroeder last year. We got like 3 more minutes here, but last thing I want to close it out on is the Nets do have, like, I saw an article today from Bleacher Report that was doing win-loss projections for every team, and they said 16-66 for the Nets. And I was like, I get it. Like, they have a ton of all the incentive in the world to be really bad. But I went through it and like, they do have a lot of capable guys who have been in playoff rotations before. What are your feelings with all these guys that are going to be getting minutes early, as we just said? Are you like, you spoke about this in the past a little bit, but are you buying into, could there be a hotter start than expected like there was last year? Or do you think that the ball handling limitations and all that is just going to handicap them where that's not really in the cards?
That's a good question. It's kind of what I'm struggling with. I think there will be something similar to last year where, again, they just have a decent game plan and like they're rolling out a lot of quality NBA players. Yeah, I don't know. The drop off from Dennis Schroeder on a heater to like,
yeah, that's where I've landed.
The rookies and like, right, you slide Cam Thomas over to the 1 maybe sometimes, primary ball handling. Like, I'm just in between, because that's CJ.
Even CJ to MPJ, I think there's going to be. Yeah, I'm also trying not to like get too excited about the Ben Saraf versus Hapoel Jerusalem tape. Like, we'll see it against NBA teams this weekend, and then we'll have a decision on that. Last thing before we close it out, just the Nets started, obviously, what was it, 10-11 last year out of the gate, and that was like nobody ever saw that coming. 21 games, same sample size. Give me your record prediction.
I think they were 9-10, but
9-10. Okay, 20 games. Give me your record prediction.
See, I could load up the schedule and go through it, but I'll say 6-13.
Okay, I was gonna say 5 wins. That was where I landed. So I think it'll be I think it'll be worse than last year by a decent amount, but I think that they'll be in some games that might surprise people.
That's the other thing. It was really, they had a wild clutch time, just hot start last year, which you would just expect to regress. And like, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that I thought Dorian was just like a really reliable, dependent, as well as he could have played at the beginning of last year. And like, Zaire and Noah just aren't as good as they are right now. So yeah, I'm with you on 6 wins, but again, I think the story of the season is like, how aggressive are they willing to get with this tank? I have no idea.
And we'll have conversations. We could do a whole pod on that down the line, and I think we will. But Lucas, we got more Nets basketball. You'll be up bright and early, and I think we'll circle back. We'll talk about those games, and we'll have some other stuff that we get back to. So appreciate you taking the time as always, man. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk with Lucas. If you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you have a second and you enjoy the content, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review, anything you can do to engage. Much appreciated. We got more Nets preseason action coming up. We got more practices, a lot more going on. So I have all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.